If you've been shopping for a used Harley-Davidson and you've been checking out some bikes from the 90s and you're curious about the 80 cubic inch Evolution engine, today we're going to take a look at that motor and see if it's a solid performer and if it would still be viable to buy a motorcycle with that engine in it today. So before we get too far into the video today, please be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already.
They're the best reason yet to own a genuine Harley-Davidson with the revolutionary V2 Evolution engine.
So the 1340 powertrain, 1,340 cc's, 80 cubic inch. This motor was introduced in 1984, the Evolution V-Twin. This engine basically saved Harley-Davidson after the AMF years. It was oil tight and reliable. And as the years went by, it got even better. So for today's video, I'm not going to go back as far as the 1980s. I'm going to focus on the Evo from the 1990s. You can still get a lot of your favorite models that we have today, even a Dyna, from the 1990s. The Evo is a solid performing motor. It's not a super horsepower or torque producer, but for a cruiser, it's an excellent starting point that you can pick up really cheap. While I say really cheap, those older bikes have really gained in popularity and the price has kind of gone up on them a little bit. I've found bikes that are a complete basket case for $1,000 all the way up to fully customized, fully hopped up for almost $13,000. You could almost throw out the book value on these older bikes, and the value of those older bikes is really what you're willing to pay for them. The Evo models for the most part were all carbureted bikes, which a carburetor does have its benefits. If you don't feel like messing with the ECM, you're not comfortable with all the electronics, and you kind of, like me at one point, I had the same feeling like that's a lot more to go wrong. Carburetors are still very viable today. These are simple to work on. You need a simple jet kit, very easy to tune, and since Harley-Davidson only has one carburetor, it's easily accessible under your air cleaner on the right-hand side. Now looking at these older bikes, you can't expect a lot of the modern features like the 6-speed transmission. They're all 5 speeds. And also with that carburetor, it's hard to beat the sound of that Harley-Davidson Lope. The new fuel injected bikes, they still sound good, but they just don't have that Lope that you can get from a carbureted Evo. And surprising enough, even though this engine went away in 1999, Harley-Davidson actually still sells Screamin Eagle performance parts for the 1340 Evo. There's a huge market of parts out there, plenty of support from Harley-Davidson dealers, of course. Some Harley-Davidson dealers, they may not work on them. Some dealerships have a policy where they won't touch anything over 10 years old. To your benefit, independent shops, they love these bikes. They're super easy to work on for them. And there's a huge knowledge base out there, just like there is for the twin cam. And one of my favorite parts about the Evolution engine is that the cams are gear driven. They don't use chains, there's no tensioners, everything's gear operated in this motor, well, except the primary. There's a few little quirks about these engines. The earlier models, they shared parts with the shovel head, which, depending on how you look at it, I don't know, shovel head had some issues with it. But the later models put in new lifters in them and you're good to go. So let's see what kind of base numbers we get and then what just a set of exhaust, an air cleaner, and a jet kit can do for your Evo. So our stock Evolution motor isn't the biggest horsepower producer in the world. It's only producing about 49 horsepower and 62 foot-pounds of torque. But if you find a stock one and just with the stock header and some slip-on mufflers and you put a jet kit in this with a high-flow air cleaner, this is going to boost your horsepower right up to about 65 horsepower at the peak and roughly 72 foot-pounds of torque. So, bone stock, that's about like an 883. And even with a jet kit, some mufflers, and an air cleaner, we're pushing horsepower of about a modern 1200 Sportster. These bikes were not known for horsepower. That's not really quite up to today's standards. But let's keep digging a little bit and see what we can pull out of one if we really got into it and put some more work into this motor. So moving up the line to the stage 2 for this bike, we're going to build on that stage 1 with our exhaust, our air cleaner, but this time we're going to put a Thunderslide, the DynoJet Thunderslide kit in the carburetor, and we're going to add the Screamin Eagle for bolt-in camshaft. Like I say, these are a single gear-driven cam engine. Now from that, that's going to bump our horsepower up to about a little over 72 and right at 80 foot-pounds of torque. Okay, so camshaft thunderslide built on the Stage 1. Now we're getting somewhere. We're starting to build a little bit more power now, pull a bit more oomph in this old bike. That's not bad, but still not even close to today's modern standard. Not a lot of horsepower, doesn't quite blow the doors off yet. So let's see what happens if we up the compression in the bike and then put some good tuning with it. Let's see what an Evo could really produce reliably. Now the Stage 3 on the Evo engine, this adds 10.2 to 1 forged pistons, but we're still keeping the air cleaner, the Thunderslide kit, and the Screamin Eagle 4 bolt-in camshaft. This brings our horsepower up to just a little bit over 80 horsepower and roughly about 82, 83 foot-pounds of torque. Still really haven't done anything super major to this bike yet. So these horsepower numbers aren't nearly as impressive as what we've seen out of the twin cam models. But keep in mind, Harley-Davidson also does offer Screamin Eagle ported heads for these bikes. They offer bigger carburetors and big bore intake manifolds to go with those carburetors. Now these are just some options from Harley-Davidson to get some more power out of the Evo if you were to buy a stock one, if you could even find a stock one these days. Chances are if you do run across an Evo powered bike out there, it's already going to have a lot of this stuff done to it. If you like working on motorcycles, Evo is a great place to start and build it up into something that you don't see every day. So definitely on an Evo with the ported heads, good tuning, bigger carburetor, everything that the Stage 3 kit holds, you could probably expect to get upwards of 90 horsepower out of these bikes if they're tuned well. But one thing to bear in mind about the Evo engine is that it is super reliable. I mean, maybe you guys have heard of Adam Sandoval. He rode his Evo, I believe his was a 1996. He rode this motorcycle to every Harley-Davidson dealership in the lower 48 states. If you guys watch Shade Tree Surgeon, he has an Evo. He has an old FXR that is clapped out and it's in bad shape. It's been well ridden and well used, but the thing's still going. And I think the last video I watched where he mentioned it, I think the thing had like 70,000 miles on them. It is not uncommon to see these bikes with over 100,000 miles on them. These things will run forever. So if you could pick one up cheap that doesn't have a butt ton of miles on it, I would go for it. These are very rock solid, reliable bikes, especially with the price of today's motorcycles. If you can't afford that extra $2,000 or $3,000 to get into a twin cam, these are a great option. Even though the horsepower and torque numbers look really soft, if you've ever ridden one, they really are a blast to ride. Riding one of these bikes, they really don't feel like they only come stock with about 40 horsepower. So guys, if you're interested in an Evo model, I just kind of wanted to give you something to go on. So what you can do to them. The reliability on these motorcycles is great, but like I say, they're only a 5-speed, and there is an issue with the lifters. Some of the earlier models had some lifter issues. So if you get one, it doesn't hurt to change out to the later model lifters. 1997 and up is a good year to go with. All the independent shops out there are very, very familiar with these motorcycles. They're a wonderful option to go with. So guys, if you're in the market for a used Harley-Davidson and you're looking at an Evo, I hope it helped you out. They are rock solid bikes. You can get a little bit of power out of them. Nothing that's gonna, blow the roof off, but they are fun to ride. They have a great sound with that carburetor. They're easy to work on, and best of all, they are extremely reliable. So guys, till next time, don't forget to give the video a like, hit the subscribe button, and I'll catch you guys next week.